Hello, and welcome to episode 14 of the Libby Shaw Show. Now, before I get into it, I want to start by saying that I normally plan my podcasts, but occasionally things change and I have a new spur of the moment idea. And that's happened with a couple of podcasts so far, and it's exactly what's happened with this one. I'd planned one topic, but I'm just not feeling it. So there's another topic that I'm feeling way more, and I feel like it would make a much better podcast. As some of you know, I was a victim, and when I use that word, I use it much more lightly than in a serious way. Basically, last September, I lost my job, and a month later, I purchased a bike so I could do Uber Eats and DoorDash while I searched for a new job. 10 months later, and I still haven't been able to find a stable job. When I say stable job, I mean a traditional 9 to 5 job. My income on Uber Eats and DoorDash has fluctuated significantly because I was using a bike, and therefore affected by a number of things such as the weather. If it was too hot, it was difficult to work. If it was too cold or raining, it was difficult to work. I was restricted with items I could pick up. If items were too heavy, I couldn't pick them up because for safety reasons, I've had weight limits on what I'm willing to carry on my back. That has been because of occupational health and safety. Now, despite my best efforts though, I did wind up getting sciatica, which is extremely painful. Basically, I pinched a nerve in my back, which caused pain in my right leg and numbness in my right foot. After seeing a doctor a few days after the pain started, I was prescribed anti-inflammatories, and it's gradually getting better. Now that brings me to what today's podcast is about. I belong to a couple of delivery driver Facebook groups, and so I'm up to date with what other drivers are earning and how that compares to my income. Quite frankly, my earnings on a bike had started to tank. And I knew I had to take action with either finding a traditional job, but let's be honest, the job market is absolutely fried right now, so that hasn't exactly been easy. The last few months though, I've been considering buying a car so that I can earn more money. I was looking at the sums a few months ago, and I did look into renting to buy a car, but it would have taken 5 years to pay off. And that just wasn't something I was willing to do. Then a couple of weeks ago, I started looking at cars online because I've also been watching a bunch of videos on YouTube, van life videos, and it got me thinking about how important having a car actually is. I looked at a few cars online, and there was one I was going to test drive, but I decided against that one. Then someone in one of the Facebook groups I belong to advertised that they were selling a car. That particular car was out of my price range, so I had to rule it out. But they said they had another car for sale, so I test drove it. That was the first time I'd driven in 13 years, and my first time driving in Sydney. And I then bought the car a few days later. It literally took everything I had to buy the car, and I mean everything. Now, some people say cars are liabilities, but when you use them for work purposes, they can actually be an asset. So as I say, I'd done the sums over the last few months, and it was actually ridiculous that I was trying to function without a car. Now, don't get me wrong, it hasn't all been smooth sailing since I bought the car. I was so out of practice with driving and parking, so I've had to relearn it. And a few days ago, well, the day after I bought the car, I was on a delivery and I just picked up the item, and then after putting the items in my car boot, I dropped one of my car keys. And then when I tried to start the car, it wasn't going. Like it wouldn't start. So I had to call NRMA roadside assistance, which I'd bought as soon as I got the car. And I mean, like, basically before I even got it home from buying it. So when I broke down, roadside assistance took 4 hours and 3 phone calls to take it to the mechanic next door. They were the ones who realized that it wasn't going because the chip in one of my car keys had come out. That was a simple fix. However, when I tried to work on the Monday night, so this is Monday 2 weeks ago, the car kept on stalling after being stopped at traffic lights. So I had to take it back to the mechanic on Tuesday morning the next day. And anyway, I'd had to anyway because I needed to get its pink slip and it needed to be re-registered due to its age. The car did need a few repairs to be deemed roadworthy, new windscreen wipers and a bunch of new lights, plus a new battery. So the battery was fitted before I took it back on the Monday though. Anyway, on the Monday, it was stalling after stopping at traffic lights. So when it was back in on Tuesday, it needed a new part. It was something to do with the fuel. Basically, the fuel wouldn't get into the engine, and so that's why it was stolen. And so the mechanic fitted that part, and now it's no longer stalling. There is another repair that will need to be done as soon as I can. So I'll be taking it back to that mechanic as soon as I can to get that next part replaced. I think I'm going to be up for another few $100s. Anyway, after that particular repair is done, I do intend to get a dash cam, alarm, and a new car stereo for the car. Now, I don't need a new car stereo, but generally I prefer to have my own car stereo fitted rather than just having the factory car stereo, especially when the car is so old. These things aren't as urgent as that next repair though. For some more background on my history with cars. So I've had 4 cars previously. In Auckland, my first car was at 20, and I had that car for a couple of months. But then when I was driving from Auckland to Wellington when I was at radio school, I accidentally put diesel into the car, and so that caused the engine to die. So that was a BMW 320i. The next car was a Volkswagen Vento, and it was written off in a car crash that I'd had on a Saturday night in Western Auckland near the Waitakere Ranges. My third car was another BMW, and it just randomly died one day. And then I didn't have a car for a few years when I bought another VW, but this time it was a VW Golf. And one time when I was reversing into a parking building, I accidentally destroyed the wing mirror's glass, so I had to get that replaced. And I also got a new car stereo fitted into that car. And so I had that car for quite a few months until I left Auckland at the end of 2013. So as I mentioned, I hadn't driven since then despite being fully licensed, because I simply didn't need a car. I was able to get by with public transport. So that was until a few days before I bought the car, when I made the call that I needed a car for work, and I mean need. Doing deliveries on a bike just wasn't sustainable long term, and my earnings weren't as high as they could be, which was incredibly frustrating. So at the time of writing this, I couldn't parallel park, which I never could. However, since writing this podcast, I can now parallel park. It is still very difficult, but I can now do it. And it's quite amazing how fast the ability to drive actually comes back to you. So anyway, there have been a lot of expenses that I didn't plan for when buying the car. And although I'm up for more repairs shortly, I am very happy with the purchase. So that, of course, gives you a little bit of background on what prompted today's podcast topic. Sydney drivers have absolutely no chill. So at the time of writing this, this was on I don't even remember what day it was. It was on a weekday. It was on a weekday, and there was no car parking, and I was on a delivery. So I had to illegally park with my hazard lights on for 1 minute. Not something I like to do, and not something I encourage. However, I needed to make the delivery. Now, just on that, there actually need to be more loading zones in inner suburbs for delivery drivers and couriers. And what really gets me is that at least one male driver abused me from his car. Then later on that same day, I was at a red light. I'm going to repeat that. I was at a red light and another driver started abusing me from his car, being like, "Why aren't you going? You need to go." And I'm thinking to myself, like, it's a red light. Then I was on another delivery in a one-way street, and this was one of those one-way streets where it's basically one lane and there's no space for parking. Like, even a Coles truck had to illegally stop to do his delivery. And so while I was doing my delivery, which was alcohol, so it's not like I could just leave it due to legal requirements, another male driver abused me, knowing full well that I was only going to be 1 minute. Then I was trying to park close to home tonight. Now, bear in mind, I always indicate. Like, I'm not one of those people who doesn't know what the indicate button is. I know how to indicate, and I always indicate. Like, even when there's no cars around, I indicate. I follow the road rules to the letter, and yet another guy abused me from his car. It doesn't end there though. I also stick to the speed limit. Even when I first learned to drive at 20 on the open road at night time in New Zealand, I stuck to the speed limit. And some drivers have basically been tailgating me. What part of limit do people not understand? The limit is the limit. Like, it's the maximum. It doesn't mean that you have to go above it or at it. It's just the limit. Now, since these incidents, I've done some Google searches on Sydney drivers, and they seriously have absolutely no chill and are so uptight. Nobody is so busy that they can't afford to wait 2 minutes or whatever. Now, I get that a lot of people are probably stressed with the cost of living compared to wages, but it's absolutely no justification for abusing other motorists. I have encountered road rage when I was cycling as well. I'd have motorists abuse me for riding on the road, and then I'd have pedestrians abuse me for riding on the footpath. Basically, if you cycle, you just can't win. And since I've been driving again, yeah, I've been stuck behind cyclists on push or e-bikes. And I always leave them plenty of space, like at least 3 to 5 car lengths. In short, what I'm really trying to say is this. Sydney drivers need to chill out and stop being so aggressive, especially when someone is just trying to make an honest living. Now, on the flip side of that, though, I was at a service station one night last week, and I was filling up with my car with more petrol. And for some reason, like, I'd forgotten how to open the bonnet so I could put water in the car. Anyway, I asked a guy if he could help me out, and this particular guy did help me out. And so I was able to put water in my car while I filled up with petrol. I don't understand why Sydney male drivers are so aggressive, and it is always male drivers. What's the hurry? Of course, when I was using public transport, yeah, I encountered public transport rage. And maybe it's because I'm still in the honeymoon phase of driving again, but I'm one of the most considerate drivers. I just let people go. If they want to tailgate me and it's safe to pull over, I just pull over to the left and just let them go. They can be in a hurry if they want to be in a hurry. Like, I don't want to be rushed when I'm driving, and I'm not going to speed just because some impatient Sydney driver wants me to. I'd rather stick to the road rules. That said, though, do I make some risky moves? Absolutely. I frequently do U-turns where I shouldn't, but I always ensure there's no traffic nearby, mainly because I don't want to be rushed when doing those U-turns. And I'm just really enjoying learning to drive again. Most of it's come back already, but I could still improve on parking. Anyway, having a car is just making a huge difference to me. And everything I've encountered is like people are taking having a vehicle for granted. And they just act so entitled on the roads. And the fact is, accidents happen when people don't consider other road users. Anyway, That's all I wanted to talk about in episode 14 of the Libby Shaw Show. I hope you enjoyed this episode and look forward to you tuning in next time.